resources, or you're buying them in bulk for a school or a neighborhood or anything like that, feel free to email me, Mayor Q, at kcmo.org. That's Mayor Q at kcmo.org, and we are happy to kind of get you in touch with more masks and all those sorts of resources. As a reminder, there are a lot of people who will talk to us sometimes and say, I saw a big off hours party at 2 a.m. and there were 200 people in this nightclub. Nobody's wearing masks, anything like that. You can call 311 during our weekdays, or you can email anytime. COVID violations, that's COVID, COVID, violations, violations, at kcmo.org, COVID violations at kcmo.org. And with that, I want to start off with a few different questions. And don't worry, keep leaving your questions in the comments. I see them here. Be nice. It's the holiday season. I've got holiday boxes behind me on this side, so feel free to be a part. First question is from Scott. What percentage of cases in Kansas City are linked with bars, restaurants, and any other business entity that are being restricted? Well, Scott, more than 40% of recent COVID-19 cases in Kansas City are from young people in their 20s and 30s. When Kansas City's disease detectives, we have folks that work with our health department who track down a number of these types of cases. When they've worked with these individuals to contact trace, that means to see who they've been around, where they might have gotten COVID-19 from. A significant number of these individuals have admitted they had recently visited a bar or tavern, or in other cases, a restaurant. And so it kind of goes from the age group is people in their 20s and 30s, right? Lots of them have said, we've been out in bars and restaurants, areas where you're seeing significant spread. And so that leads to even further uncontrolled community spread. That's a term of art. But that uncontrolled community spread means that we don't know where everyone's getting COVID-19 from in terms of those who are contracting the virus, but we do know that many who have, before showing symptoms, have been frequenting our restaurants and bars. And let me actually take a moment to commend lots of our restaurants and bars. I visit with many of them often. I know all of them have done better distancing since certainly this crisis began. They continue to reach out. I spoke to a bar owner in Westport just last night on the phone about a lot of the work that he's doing for his staff. I thanked him for all of that work. Generally, we're all in this together. This isn't a left-right issue. This isn't a one versus the other. This is one where I think we all want to make sure that the way that we really have a strong economy is to make sure people stay healthy, to make sure that we get back to a point where we can be confident about getting back out there, particularly once the vaccine really is rolling out in Kansas City. A few other things about our orders. Most of our complaints and most of our actions, be it health department or regulated industry, have been at late night maskless gatherings at bars and restaurants, where masking, social distancing, and capacity limits were clearly ignored. And so we have seen that social distancing is important for us. Wearing a mask is important, and your capacity requirements are important. The White House, the Trump White House, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have continued to recommend to the state of Missouri that we curtail hours for restaurants and bars. That's in the most recent White House Coronavirus Task Force recommendation, as well as reducing capacity. We're following the best medical and scientific advice that we're getting from Washington, from the CDC in Atlanta, and from doctors and physicians here in Kansas City and the greater Kansas City metropolitan area. We will continue to follow that, but we'll continue to try to make sure we're as balanced as we can possibly be. My friend Micah asks, why did Kansas City decide to limit CARES Act grants to businesses only in one geographic area when businesses all over the city are struggling? Will there be additional grants for those businesses? Well, this is one of our many challenges right now because we're dealing with different levels of government. And so we in Kansas City, Missouri, were not a direct recipient of CARES Act funds. What that means is that all of our CARES Act funding, all of it, came through our 4 county governments. All of them took different approaches to providing CARES Act funding. Clay County, and I commend them for us, gave us the significant amount of CARES Act funding fairly quickly, about, It would be, the number off the top of my head was at least $11 million that we received. I'd like to think we got 11. We then quickly were able to use that to address a lot of our public safety needs, frontline workers getting masks, testing, etc. We continued to spend it on that. In Clay County, we were also, because of the quick disbursement of funding we received and the amount, given the population that we have in Clay County, which is about 130,000 people, as compared to 330,000 or so in Jackson County. So that meant in Clay, we were able to give significant support to small business relief funds through our Economic Development Corporation of Kansas City. Our small business relief funds in Clay County, I think, amassed to about $2.7 million in business relief, 2.7 million. In Jackson County, a larger part of Kansas City, we needed to spend more of the money. I believe our initial tranche of funds was $18 million or so. As you might expect, 11 million for 135,000 people, 18 million for 335,000. So the numbers were a little bit off. Unfortunately, we didn't have as much funding for business relief. We had to make sure we were doing things like paying for testing, paying to help support our Kansas City Health Department, and paying to protect our frontline workers. And so we will continue to make sure that we address a number of those issues. In Kansas City and Jackson County, portions of Kansas City, we were able to extend $500,000 that we extended through our general fund. That's through CARES Act money. We issued a subsequent request to Jackson County for more CARES Act funding for business support. Although that request was denied, we'll continue to make those requests, particularly if we get a second stimulus set of funds. And we would certainly love to distribute that to our small businesses in Kansas City. So many, particularly in the restaurant and hospitality industry, have been adversely impacted by COVID-19. In Platte County, which has about 54,000 Kansas Cityans, we are yet to receive any funding. We continue to work with the Platte County commissioners to see that we can get some funding support, particularly again to our frontline workers, and we will hope. We put in about a $3 million request. None of this is going to pay off any budget items for Kansas City, Missouri government. They're going to help out frontline workers. They're going to help fund our healthcare testing, our contact tracing. They're helping to stop the spread of COVID-19. From Shane, I own and operate a restaurant and bar in the Northland. Information is circulating that we can keep patrons up to 11 p.m. as long as our last order filled on food and alcohol is by 10 p.m. This would help on 720 Chiefs games. Please clarify. And something we noted last night, in order to be consistent with some of our peer counties, we have added in our FAQs that our closure order, which is still 10 o'clock, means that all, that's basically last call at 10 o'clock. What that means is that all food and drink orders need to be rung up by 10 o'clock, but patrons who remain at that point can remain only for a reasonable amount of time. So you don't need to necessarily rush everyone out right at 10, but our hope would be that everybody wraps up their food, wraps up their drink in a reasonable amount of time after 10 p.m. And that's consistent with the FAQs that are now on our Kansas City, Missouri health orders, also consistent with our FAQs in Jackson County. I would actually probably be prudent to read them for you if we could, but I'll need to just pull that up as we're going along. So we'll make sure that we do that just now, okay? But in so many words, it's not that we're setting a different time, right? You still need to wrap up, have rung up your orders by 10 o'clock, but people have the chance to finish their dishes, they have the chance to finish their drinks, they have a reasonable amount of time, and no way should somebody still be sitting at a bar at 11:30 p.m. or really, frankly, 11 p.m. And so that's where we're saying really just a reasonable amount of time. We would hope that you could be done 20 minutes, 30 minutes, that sort of thing, but nothing too late. And so that's where we are right now. You get that reasonable amount of time, but people need to make sure they're finishing their orders, etc., shortly after that time happens. What are we going to do? This is from Shannon. What are we going to do for hospitals that are already filling up? Oh, and by the way, there's been no change to our 11th amended order. I do want to note that. And so, in so many words, we still have that 10 o'clock closure time. I know I'll have a few questions down the line relating to can we move to 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, no limit. That has not occurred in Kansas City, Missouri, and we'll continue to listen to health advice to see what conditions warrant any changes at issue. From Shannon, what are we going to do for hospitals that are already filling up? Are there going to be makeshift hospitals set up to help provide more beds? Thank you, Mayor Q. We hope we don't get to that point. You know, right now, much of our challenge has been in staffing. You know, we have large venues in Kansas City, T-Mobile Center. I can see out my window, H. Bartle Hall, etc. But the biggest challenge is making sure we have enough medical professionals who can address the challenge, to make sure that we have enough particularized and specialized medical equipment to address our challenges. That's why we're trying to keep case numbers down. To the extent that any makeshift facilities are necessary, those types of plans have been made in coordination with the Missouri National Guard. We hope we don't get there. We're trying to have orders right now that make sure we don't get there. And so that's the level of work that I think that we're trying to do at this point. From Jerry, why have airports and casinos been allowed to stay open, even during stay-at-home or safer-at-home orders? Casinos, including the few in Kansas City, Missouri, are regulated by the Missouri Gaming Commission. And we have not, it's not our view that we have the authority to exercise further control on operations at our riverboat casinos based on Missouri law. Our airports are largely regulated by the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA. Same story there. So we have certainly continued to work with KCI Airport, our health department, as well as others, to make sure that they're following the same types of rules. You see social distancing, you see many of the requirements at issue. You don't see buffets right now at the Kansas City International Airport, but at the same time, they will continue to be regulated in most of their operations, particularly on the air side, i.e. the other side of security, by the Federal Aviation Administration and by the Transportation Security Administration. From Melissa, how are you currently working with Jackson County and other area and state officials? What has been the response of those officials on your efforts to to keep Kansas Cityans safe? Well, a few different things. One, in terms of working with other officials, just yesterday I had the chance to talk to the Jackson County Executive, Frank White, the Mayor CEO of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas, David Albee, and the Chairman of the Johnson County Kansas Commission, Ed Eilert. In other situations, my staff and I have talked to the Platte County Commissioners and the Clay County Commissioners, and I have fairly regular conversations with other mayors throughout Missouri, including the mayor of St. Louis, the mayor of Springfield, the mayor of Columbia, and the mayor of Cape Girardeau and Independence, with Governor Mike Parson of Missouri. I speak to, and our health director speaks to frequently, leadership in our state and nationally and locally in connection with how we can be consistent on orders. We all recognize that consistency is best. Indeed, the Kansas City, Missouri current Safer at Home order is based on health director advice from Kansas City, Missouri, Jackson County, Clay County, Platte County, Johnson County, Kansas, Wyandotte County, Kansas. Unfortunately, in my view, the Johnson County Kansas Commission elected to depart in a few key areas on their last order. I hope as they seat a new commission in mid-January, they will find a way to get back in concert with the rest of our jurisdictions. But by and large, we're largely recommending many of the same things. 1, wearing a mask. 2, social distancing. 3, if you are at risk in any way, you likely should not be taking part in certain risky activities, including, but not limited to, eating out, drinking out, getting in any type of setting where you might be in a group of people. Those are very high risk. While some of those activities aren't fully prohibited, we do suggest that you exercise caution in connection with all of them. From Caleb, specifically, what's going to determine whether you let the mask mandate expire on January 15th or keep it going? Do you think it's working despite the numbers put out by the health department? You know, it's interesting. We issued our mask mandate and an extension of our mask mandate back in August. And I recall a number of people at the time saying, Lucas, you are nutty for doing so. How dare we have the mask mandate for so long? My view was this. It's interesting, by the way, a question, but I'll get back to that in a second. My view has been ever since the beginning of this crisis that we need to be clear, we need to be as consistent as possible, and we need to be honest about the challenges that are coming to us ahead. It was my view in the summer, it's my view today, that wearing masks are one of the best things that we can do to make sure people stay safe. And I wish, and I'll make sure my staff actually puts this out on Twitter and Facebook, but you may have seen a graphic, and in fact, I'm asking my staff, I hope one or two of them are watching at least, to put up this graphic, that Swiss cheese type of thing, where, you know, if you have one block of Swiss cheese, you have a whole lot of holes, and something can get through. But if you have a whole block, right, so one slice of Swiss cheese, things can get through. Whole block of Swiss cheese, you know, they can't. And so our view is layer one is, this is where I get in trouble because I want to use an example, right? Layer one is your mask, right? Layer two is making sure we're maintaining social distancing. Layer three is making sure that you're washing your hands often. Layer four is making sure that you're not in large groups. Right? Those are a number of the things that we're doing to make sure we have a defense. Not one single thing will make sure you're fully safe. Indeed, I read one of the comments right now, and I've seen these a lot, and you know, it's the sort of thing that happens. Somebody said, well, does Mr. COVID just come out at 10? No, it's preposterous. But, right, we have layered our defenses to make sure that people can be safer. We're layering and making sure we have good defenses to make sure that people actually, right, won't be subject to a large crowd, won't be in a situation where people aren't wearing masks, won't be in a situation where we saw a number of times before in our enforcement of our COVID-19 orders in the summer and the spring and the fall, where you had 100 people in certain bars crowded closely together, right? Those were significant challenges. So not one thing alone is the defense. All of them working together are keeping our community safer. And to the question of, do you think our efforts are working? The answer is yes. We have over 300 people dead, and that breaks my heart. I know some of the people who have died. They've been friends of mine, they've been friends of my family. But the reason we're doing this is to not double or triple or quadruple that number. We all remember the challenges that we saw, particularly in the Northeast last spring. We saw the challenges that we saw in places like New Orleans and Detroit. New Orleans, a city that's smaller than Kansas City, Missouri, and a metro area that's smaller than that of the Kansas City, Missouri metropolitan area, and where we saw thousands of deaths. We have still not hit their numbers, even having the growth we have now. That's why we take these steps. That's why we think it is so important. There is not an hour that goes by where I'm not thinking about the challenging balance that we have in terms of economic challenges, business challenges, workforce challenges, etc. I grew up with some struggle. I know what it's like for people who are struggling to make ends meet each and every day. But what I also know is that it's vital for us to make sure people stay healthy and that people stay alive. And that disproportionately, our poorest Kansas Cityans, the ones that many of you purport to write me about, are those who will suffer the most from uncontrolled spread of COVID-19. That's why we keep these orders. That's why we make sure people need to stay safe. That's why we have the blocks of defense, masks and hours and capacity and washing your hands and testing and contact tracing. That's why we're doing these sorts of things. I take no joy in seeing anybody be put out of business. But I really think that my job is to make sure we're doing all we can to save lives. And we're going to make sure that we continue to do that as long as possible. On the other side, there are some folks who ask me, why haven't we closed down the bars and the restaurants entirely? And I understand that perspective. And let me be clear, I don't necessarily think that it's safe for a number of folks in our community to be out eating in restaurants and bars. But we do believe that a lot of the mitigation steps that have been taken, at least at this point, have informed us that there still can be, at least as best as possible, safe distancing, safe spacing, and particularly because many of our restaurants and bars have looked at their air systems ways that we do not believe that there is an impermissible amount of risk to eating and drinking at a restaurant while you're maintaining good social distancing, while all of the rules are being followed. We will reevaluate that consistently and indeed with our next order, and I expect us to make sure we look to those steps. This is not about profits over health. This is not about health over profits. This is not about anything relating to politics. All of us are trying to save lives, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. And it may be incredibly unpopular, particularly in the states of Missouri and Kansas, where counties that border us don't even have mask mandates, but we think these sorts of things are essential. Most of our spread, by the way, anecdotally and from our contact tracers, continues to be in small and unmasked gatherings. And then the challenge is people bringing COVID-19 home to their families. President-elect Biden has implemented a 100-day mask plan. So we will look forward to working with this next administration on what those next steps will look like. And indeed, I will say this to anybody who thinks we have challenges. We have worked with our current administration, the Trump administration, to the extent we can as well. I spoke to Dr. Deborah Birx of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, who actually recommended a number of the steps we've taken. Limiting the hours our bars and restaurants are open, making sure we have reduced capacities, expanding our mask requirements. These are the sorts of things in all parties that we're trying to make sure we do now. From Keeley, how and when can we get vaccinated? Like you, I'm very interested and excited to see the vaccine rolled out in Missouri and Kansas. As you likely know, there will be a priority system for how the vaccine comes, and that's being dictated to us by our state leadership and by the federal government's dictate. The state of Missouri is receiving roughly 2% of coronavirus vaccines based on the population in the state of Missouri. I believe that would be the same for the state of Kansas, although a slightly smaller percentage because they have fewer people in the state of Kansas. After that, vaccines will be administered to those who are in greatest risk, many of our elderly, those who are in long-term care facilities, our frontline workers who have been consistently exposed, and then first responders, among others. After that, we will see it spread to the rest of our society. A few things that I will make sure that we work for ongoing. What we're working for is to make sure that all of the health inequities that we see in the spread of COVID-19 are considered as we look to vaccines. For example, Kansas City, Missouri disproportionately treats those who are suffering from COVID-19. The first death from someone who died of COVID-19 was not a patient from Kansas City, Missouri, but they died in Kansas City. Every day our hospitals in Kansas City are treating people from throughout Missouri and eastern Kansas. That is what we do because we are humane, we are responsible, and we are good people. But I also want to make sure that as the vaccine's rolled out, that's taken into consideration. The fact that a lot of people come into our city, the fact that our frontline workers come from a number of different jurisdictions, the fact that this is an area where there are lots of folks, including an at-risk homeless population, that does not have ready access to health care and testing like so many of our other groups do. I will continue to fight tooth and nail to make sure that those who are in at-risk groups and those that need to be covered with vaccines are covered. And it's not just the sort of thing that I think shows once again all of the inequities that we have in our healthcare system. You know, a lot of people have told me COVID-19 doesn't discriminate. No, it doesn't, but our healthcare system does. And we've seen throughout this crisis with disproportionate infection rates and deaths in our Black population, our Latino population, and among all of those who are on the lower end of the on the economic scale, we continue to see that those are challenges that we need to make sure we address, that we confront, and that we fix. From Kiara, large demographics of residents are experiencing one of the greatest financial crises in modern history. What measures will be put in place to combat inequality from long-term effects of this pandemic? A few things we've done already. One was our Small Business Relief Fund. It is clear to me that $3.2 million won't get the job done. Since the beginning of this crisis, I've reached out to those who represent us in Washington, on the left and the right, and said, What can we do to get stimulus funds and relief, particularly to those in businesses that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19? Those businesses include those in our restaurant and hospitality industries, many of which restaurants, hotels, and others have closed or shuttered entirely. Many in our service industry because people aren't coming into homes right now. We need a plan, a new plan, not just at the local level, but at the state and federal levels. And we will continue to work with our state and federal delegations to make sure that we do have long-term support for all of those industries. From the Kansas City budget side, I won't lie to you. We have very tight budgets right now at Kansas City. But every loose cent, every loose dollar that we can find, we will try our best to make sure that we are applying it to small business relief funds, that we're waiving and reducing fees that it takes to interact with Kansas City, Missouri government, that we're making interactions with Kansas City, Missouri government more efficient, including putting more and more things online so you don't have to come into City Hall and both expose yourself perhaps to COVID-19, but also that we can make government more efficient. Time is money. I understand that. It's always been that way, but more so now than ever. If we can make it easier to do business with Kansas City, Missouri, then we can at least try to save you hassle, save you some expense, and make sure people can get by better. From Zara, is Kansas City doing anything to prevent the mass evictions that are on the horizon? Relating to evictions, Kansas City has continued to, first, I'll go back to the spring, work with our federal delegation, including Congressman Emanuel Cleaver in conversations, Senators Roy Blunt and Josh Hawley, to do all we can to push our federal agencies to continue the current moratorium on evictions that was issued by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. However, we recognize that in some of our local counties, particularly Jackson, Clay, and Platte County, and the circuit court level, judges have elected not to continue the eviction moratorium. A few steps that we'll be taking in the week ahead. One is to continue our outreach to the presiding judges in all those jurisdictions to show, at least from behalf of the mayor's office, we continue to believe that that eviction moratorium should be enforced, and it's essential in a pandemic to not put people out on the streets. The next thing that we'll continue to do is make sure that through our community development block grant funds, among others, we support eviction relief, both in the retention of counsel for those who are facing eviction, but also in loans and other funds to those who are facing eviction and need some stopgap in funding to make sure that they won't be out on the streets. But I recognize that that's not enough. We will continue to do all we can to make sure that people have the support, have access to affordable housing, have access to good housing authority action, to make sure that they have a place to live that's safe, have a place to live where there aren't landlords that are unnecessarily impatient on those who are having trouble paying now, and trying to work with both our housing provider community, but also our renters, to make sure that we can try to survive through this present moment. What I say right now is something that I truly believe in. And by the way, Constance asked, where's your mask? Here's one, and Constance, here's another. In case you're wondering, I'm sitting in my office alone. There's no one here in the office on Saturday but me. And so I came in, and so that's why I'm able to speak to you without a mask right now. But what I will say is this. We will have a tough few months. Hang on. Wear your mask. Help each other. Order dine-out food if you can. I know I did last night. I know I do a lot of nights. Try to help everybody survive through this very moment. And that's the way that we can get through this together. What about work environments, says Cindy, such as retail stores, non-enforcing mask mandates? What rights as an employee do you have? If you have any concern about non-enforcement of mask mandates, you can call 311 or email, again, covidviolations@kcmo.org. Again, call 311 or covidviolations@kcmo.org. Those are ways that you're able to report any situation. Contrary to popular belief, we actually do enforce at large retailers as well. There's a large box store that perhaps Sam Walton helped invent, and they may have a location or two in Kansas City that our health department, our regulated industries have visited with during this crisis. We are enforcing in many places, and we will continue to do so. All of us play a part. So if you do have some concern, call 311 or email covidviolations@kcmo.org. For Mark, my man Mark Peavy, Masks or face coverings are required both indoors and outdoors in Kansas City, Missouri, when 6 feet of physical distance cannot be maintained. True. If there is a, quote, stop the steal rally today, will this requirement be enforced if 6 feet of distance is not maintained? We will continue to try to enforce all orders to the fullest extent possible. As an enforcement, when we have any type of either protest action or spontaneous First Amendment gathering, we see some challenge in how you can enforce, particularly where group leaders may not reach out to the health department prior to such an event. Where we can find leaders, we try to reach out to them. Where there are organized entities that can be sanctionable, we do provide sanctions for types of activities. But if there is some spontaneous gathering or even a planned gathering this afternoon, we will try to make sure that we remind them of the rules at issue. We'll try to make sure that there's social distancing maintained, but I will certainly not speak more than what I can say and say sometimes it's difficult to enforce. A lot of you who are to the right of me politically said, why didn't you enforce these at protest actions this summer? Let me be fair to a lot of my people, by the way, who were at Black Lives Matter rallies. Many of them, most of them were wearing masks. And so I think it is actually just a falsehood to suggest that they weren't. For those who were not, we tried our very best to make sure folks were reminded of those orders. I'll remind them. And for those who may be from a different political perspective and say, well, you won't make sure that they do today, we will try to make sure that through the same area that we had before, that we are communicating with folks about these mask requirements and mask orders, and we're trying to make sure we can get as much compliance as possible. Other questions? From Jessica. Why are we spending $174 million on a streetcar when so many small businesses are suffering? Why not bail them out and put an unnecessary renovation on hold? In terms of the streetcar, our $174 million comes from long-planned matching funds from the federal government and is not money that we can spend on anything that we would like. There has been a particular transportation development district in connection with the streetcar that was voted on by voters in the streetcar corridor previously. The Transportation Department, the Federal Transit Administration, has provided matching funds, and that's where that money is coming from. These are not unrestricted funds that we can spend on things like preventing evictions or supporting small businesses or anything of that sort. In some ways, perhaps unfortunate. That was water in my throat, by the way, don't worry. And by the way, some people have asked me, you must be special in COVID tests somewhere different. No, I do my COVID testing at the Truman Medical Centers, like a whole lot of other people here in Kansas City, Missouri. And I encourage you, if you need testing from Truman Medical Centers and COVID-19 testing, call 816-404-CARE, 816-404-CARE. From Indigenous Smith, what is your position on the proposed Missouri bill that allows protesters to be struck by cars? I oppose that bill with all my might. There is absolutely no reason that someone should, first of all, looking at the incident in Charlottesville a few years back, where a number of protesters were seriously injured, maimed by someone driving through a protest with an automobile, I can see no reason why any bill would allow protesters to be struck by cars. I think that would be awful. From Surdek, what is going on with the airport expansion project, and what, if any, setbacks have been experienced due to COVID-19? I want to commend our aviation department and the 1,000 people who are working there every day, men and women from Kansas City, Missouri, and beyond. Our project remains on time. It remains under budget. Our planned opening day for the new KCI terminal is March 3rd, 2023. Sean Fry writes, legalize recreational marijuana. I'm trying my level best to do that. I think probably one of the greatest unfairnesses in America that we continue to see is the fact that there are now people that are making money, millions and millions of dollars off of marijuana, while there's still people, mainly brothers and sisters, who sit in jails today because of marijuana. Our marijuana policies, our drug policies in this country have been unfair for the entirety, at least of my life, which is 36 years. We need to make sure they're fairer. That's why here in Kansas City, not only did we take marijuana off of our books, off of our code of municipal ordinances, so we've decriminalized marijuana, at least as a local ordinance violation here in Kansas City, but we have also issued the mayoral marijuana pardon program. If you know someone who needs a pardon from a municipal offense, including marijuana possession, have them email mayorq@kcmo.org. That's mayorq@kcmo.org. Okay? And really a pardon on any municipal offense I'm happy to entertain. There is a pardon power. I think it's important. It shouldn't just be the sort of thing where the president, not just this president, President Clinton did it, other presidents have done it, where you're just pardoning certain types of people who may know you. We need to make sure that there's more to that. Next question from Raina, like my sister's name, Trina. Did you get the flu shot? I've never gotten one out of fear, honestly, due to the Tuskegee experiment. I did get a flu shot, and I continue to get a flu shot. I think it's important. I think it keeps us safe. I understand in a lot of communities, particularly the African-American community from which I hail, there is concern about vaccines and shots because there has been a terrible history in our country and in our community of testing and experiments done on people who look like me. That is the sort of thing that, first of all, we need to make sure the medical establishment makes amends for. They continue to. But in this situation, I believe the vaccine has been tested on all types of people. It will be fair. It will be rolled out in a fair way. We will see to it in Kansas City. And I think it will be important for all of us to make sure that we can get the vaccine as soon as it is available for us. I believe it is safe. I trust those and the many doctors and scientists and others who have worked on it. And I think that that will be the situation here. From Darlene, why are all the marijuana dispensers opening in Lee's Summit? I thought drugs come from the inner city. Wouldn't it have been fair to let them all open at once? Will any African Americans get a chance to open? Darlene, I don't know where to take your question. I have no idea if all the marijuana dispensers are in Lee's Summit. I don't use marijuana, actually, believe it or not. Although some days I think I should. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. But nevertheless, I don't know if that's the case. I don't know what other places are in line for marijuana dispensary openings, that sort of thing. I think the Missouri marijuana licensing and growing operation process has been an utter disaster. I would encourage all of us to make sure that we, actually, I would love to start a ballot initiative if anybody wants to work with me on legalizing recreational marijuana in Missouri. I think that time has come. I think the parade of horribles that they claim have occurred in Colorado, at least the times I've been there, have not occurred. I've seen the revenue production that you get from it, and I think largely the drug war has been a failure in our country. I think to the extent that we have people that are abusing narcotics, including alcohol, really, which is something we always forget about, that is a mental health issue. That's one where we need to actually address it. There's substance abuse counseling, substance abuse prevention, but the criminal law, jail, policing, arrests, that ain't working. And so that's where I think things need to go. Will any African Americans get a chance to open? I would certainly hope so. I think the process that's been used by Missouri has been unfair thus far. We need to do better, and I'll continue to more pressure on that. But look, I think there are two things that we'll probably need ballot initiatives for statewide. One, probably local control of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, which I support. And two, marijuana decriminalization statewide in Missouri. There is no reason for the current process as it is, where wealthy people who have access to agricultural loans, land, and all of that can be a landed gentry that have an ability to grow and make money off of this, rather than, and then everybody else just gets screwed. I think that's really unfair. All right, so that is all the questions that I received from Facebook before. Let me find the best way to look at all of your questions online. I appreciate all of you that are posting all types of things. It's always fascinating. No, I'm not part of the New World Order. I am also not, you all, And there is no conspiracy of mine right now to try to, I don't know, do all of these orders. But otherwise, let me see if I can get to the comments. All right, gonna kind of. Uh-oh. Well, see, that's why I can't do it that way. Okay. Although I know some of y'all got jokes. So one person asked, why do you want white approval so bad rather than making life better for black people? I actually, I reject that viewpoint. I think when you talk about a lot of the things that I've done so far in Kansas City, be it fundamentally changing policies as it relates to arrests and incarceration that have disproportionately targeted black men for decades in this community. When you look at the work that I've done in terms of changing the relationship between landlords and tenants in this city, we're disproportionately, myself included, I knew this growing up, people of color have been disproportionately negatively impacted by housing provider abuses. When you look at the fact that where we have allocated small business relief and budgets, I think, and frankly, I'm proud of our strong progressive policies to make our city more equal, to help uplift communities, particularly the African American community, and I stand by that. I think there are things that we have done that mayors in Kansas City have never thought of doing. The marijuana pardon program, for example, has thus far only gone to black applicants. Everybody can apply, but these are the sorts of things that I think are important in making sure our city is more equitable. I don't need approval from anybody but the voters at the end of the day. But you know what? I wake up every morning, I do what I hope is the best for our community. I don't get it 100% right. I go home every day in the 3rd District, which is predominantly black, where I represented before. I have obligation to God, my family, my community, and I'll continue to do that for as long as I'm in this office and hopefully for as long as I live. Okay, other questions. Where can you find contact tracing data you are looking at? The Kansas City, Missouri Health Department has a very significant, actually, COVID-19 dashboard, which provides a lot of our public information. We ask them all the time to share more. I will probably do another formal press conference sometime soon with our health director. So we will try to make sure that we're on top of all of that for you as well. Why no contract tracing in grocery stores, etc.? Blame on bars and restaurants, but not grocery stores and big business stores. And so here's the thing, y'all. This is cue to you. Most people, when they go to a grocery store, actually don't go to a grocery store, sit in one spot, take off their mask, and then sit there for an hour and a half and drink and eat, right? Most of us, actually, when we go to a grocery store, walk in, maybe get a bunch of different items, right? Then go through a checkout, often a self-checkout nowadays, and then leave. We're moving, right? We're circulating. We're not actually just sitting in a closed and smaller space and talking to each other with no masks. Restaurants and bars are different than grocery stores and Costco. I know, it seems unfortunate. I don't love Costco. I'm actually not a Costco member, right? I ain't got nothing that I owe to Costco at all. I like restaurants more. I like bars more. But importantly, we need to make sure that we're looking at areas where we have seen places where people sometimes may even have their guard down. Masks are off. They're talking to each other. There's a waiter or waitress that's bringing dishes back and forth, right? Those are the challenges that we have right now. And so that's why there is some level of difference in the treatment for all of them. Okay? 816-404-CARE for your testing. That's absolutely right. Sometimes I need a moment of humor. Did Patrick Mahomes and Brittany ask you to be the godfather yet? Hey, I'm open. I'd be happy to be. And congratulations to them. Congratulations to everybody. This has been a pretty tough year for lots of us, but there are others who've had some miracles in life, including new children, new Kansas Cityans born. I commend them for all of that. All right? Some of this is y'all fighting together. One of you says, like hiring a white man from New Jersey as city manager who's being investigated for discrimination against black and brown people. So he is not being investigated for discrimination. And his city was sued. As you probably read recently, that same issue recently happened with Kansas City, Missouri as well. Back on this gentleman, there was a lawsuit against the city, and he was one of 10 defendants. That lawsuit was dismissed. He's asked and answered a number of different times, I think, that situation. The reason we made the hire was a number of different things. One, we have very significant budget challenges in Kansas City. He has done, I think, important work in helping this prior community fill a budget gap of $70 million. Oddly enough, Kansas City has a $70 million budget gap. During his time as city administrator in Jersey City, New Jersey, they actually established an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. His city is one of the most diverse in America. He came highly recommended by Black leadership and Latino leadership in his community, including 8 of 9 city council members. And so I have confidence that he will gain the trust of our community. That allows me a chance to talk about the Kansas City Fire Department as well. Not as many of you asked about it, but I do think it is very important for us. Let me be very clear. There is no place for a lot of the situations that we heard about in the Kansas City Star stories. Some of those things included nooses, a noose found at a station, people casually using racial slurs. All those things are wholly unconscionable. There's no space for that. And because I am mayor today, I apologize for that, whether it happened since I become mayor or if it happened before. The buck stops with me. The buck stops with me, be it our tragic homicide record, discrimination in our city, or the successes as well. And so I will continue to suggest that not only do we need to make sure that we are rooting out not just those challenges, but people who engage in those types of activities, but we also need to look at our contracts with our organized labor, both on the police department side and the fire department side, to make sure that there are not protections that allow for certain things to be perpetuated. I've talked to leadership of organized labor on both sides, and I understand all of them to want to stand with us to make sure discrimination is rooted out. Let's work together to make sure that happens. No place in Kansas City should see consistent acts of discrimination. No place in Kansas City should ever tolerate. And by the way, that includes a lot of our other departments. Water, public works, other areas where we've had issues in years past. Let this be clear. We are going to fight discrimination wherever it started. We're going to look at trends here in Kansas City, Missouri. I personally would like all of our settlements to become public so that you can see how much we're holding ourselves accountable. I got nothing to hide. We should have nothing to hide. If we have a problem, we need to identify it. We need to root it out. A few more questions. Tony asked, would it improve your image as a politician? God bless y'all. Would it improve your image as a politician if you revealed the truth about the events of 9/11? Dude, see, you've been smoking too much of that weed. Let's see. Please tell me what you are doing regarding the incarcerated and COVID. That's a very good question. What are you doing regarding the incarcerated and COVID? A few different things. One, as you probably know, the city of Kansas City, Missouri does not have a jail of its own. So we contract with a number of other agencies, including the Jackson County Jail, the Vernon County Jail, and the Johnson County, Missouri Jail. Johnson County, Missouri is Warrensburg. What we have typically been doing is actually having fewer people incarcerated. I'll be honest with y'all. I'm, as you may or may not know about me, I used to teach in prisons. I think it's one of the most important things that I've ever done in my life. I don't think a lot of people should be in jail. I think if you don't harm people, you really probably shouldn't be in jail that long. And so I believe that what we need to do at this point is actually, first of all, limiting the number of people who are incarcerated. And then in the jails themselves, seeing how we can follow good protocols, adequate testing, limiting of outbreaks, etc. I have a strong relationship with our Jackson County Sheriff, Daryl Forte. He has continued to give us frequent updates on what has happened or what is happening in the jail, and we'll continue to go through those steps to make sure that we are avoiding any outbreaks in terms of incarceration. Some of y'all, I am missing where the questions begin, and you're kind of in back and forth. Like Cheryl Ferguson asked me, please answer this one. And I don't know what the first question was. What about CBD as a beneficial tool for Alzheimer's, dementia? That's above my pay grade, brother. How come only MoDOT only lets you adopt a highway when there's a lot of normal streets that need to be cleaned? MoDOT, you mean? And I don't know the answer to that. There is an Adopt a Street program in Kansas City, Missouri. I encourage you, if you're interested, to call 311. And so we'll go from there. Will there be another city lockdown? And that's a good question. I hope not. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to work together, to in some ways get through this struggle together, to make sure that we will have a point where we don't need to have any significant further lockdown. That said, I'm seeing what's happening in other parts of America right now. We've seen significant curtailment of activities, and I don't want us to get there. That's why I don't think that we need to be cavalier about some of these orders right now. I don't think we need to try to fight what is just some common sense. Wearing a mask, keeping your distancing, following the very simple rules. If we follow these steps, if we look out for each other, then we'll be in a better place to hopefully maybe avoid some of those things. I know that's what I'm trying to work on right now. Somebody else says, Steve Johnson says, now you have called our healthcare workers racist and the firefighters. Who's next? Steve's, and first of all, never mind. Who's called anybody racist? I haven't called anybody racist. But look, let me tell you something about the world. There are systemic issues, systemic inequalities that lead to how America is today. And those systemic inequalities continue to exist in Kansas City. It is not accidental that things happen the way they do. It is not accidental that if you go to municipal court this week, or if you go to Jackson County Circuit Court, or if you go to any number of places, you will see disproportionate impacts of the criminal justice system, both in victims and defendants, on people in our black community, for example. I mean, come on, y'all. I'm not the oldest man, but I've been around long enough to see how some of that inequality leads to things like a decade's worth of a difference in life expectancy in one zip code versus another in Kansas City, east of Truce versus west of Truce. Systemic inequality, such as graduation rates, systemic inequality, such as income with people who have the same level of degrees and qualifications. Come on. We're not calling anybody racist. But let me tell you this, don't use racial slurs and you won't be called racist. I expect people to actually stand up for equality in this community. All right? That's what the issue is. All right. And by the way, our frontline workers are doing real hard work. Particularly a lot of our paramedics, EMTs, and our firefighters right now. They're going out in harm's way each day. The reason that we are trying to make sure that we're rooting out discrimination is in many ways not just because it is necessary and essential, but also because fundamentally, I don't want somebody tarnishing the name of the good men and women who are going out every day, putting on that fire department uniform and not engaging in these types of activities. They don't want that in their fire stations, in their training, in their city any more than anybody else. So that to me is kind of much of why we are doing this as well. Here's a good question. I really wanted to clean up a street near me, from Jessica, and it's like pulling teeth to get assistance. So I'm just going to do it on my own. Jessica, call my office. Phone number is 513-3500, 513-3500, and we can help you out. There are neighborhood cleanups. Usually we do those during the spring. So if you try to get that set up, usually wait for the spring just because of the weather and all the extra help we can find. And that's generally where we are on, okay? Can a mayor make a law? We make laws with city council and ordinances. Sometimes there is ordinance authority or charter authority, such as some of these current orders, where the mayor is able to act in a time of a state of emergency, such as where we are. You're talking about some other things. Christian asks, how can citizens support legislative priority number 1 on local control of the Kansas City Police Department? A few different things. One, call your state senators. I'll be calling them too. We have some good state senators here in Kansas City, Missouri. Somebody should make sure that gets introduced at that level. I believe that Representative Ashley Bland Manlove of Kansas City will be introducing it in the State House of Representatives. And that will be important for us, but we need to make sure that it's heard in the Senate. If it is not passed this year in the legislature, I think we need to have further conversations about how we create a statewide ballot initiative and referendum on it. This is one place I agree with a lot of y'all, particularly because some of you who are what you may call, you may be activists on here, disagree with how I do things. Having 20% of the police department be democratically elected, 20% of the board of police commissioners being democratically elected, meaning 80% is not, is a problem to me. I called it colonial the other day, and that to me is the issue. It is colonial. I see no reason why Kansas Cityans should have less right than Grandview, Gladstone, Grain Valley to have self-determination about how we're going to do public safety in our community. I think that it should be fundamental on these sorts of things. And so that's why I'll continue to fight that, and that's why I think it was important to make it number 1 priority. I believe, Cheryl Ferguson, I see that you said trespassing charges, and I think your question is going to be related to either the trespassing sign or if trespassing charges were brought. And I need to figure out, I thought the trespassing sign was down permanently as well. I'm seeing that it is not. I probably would see across the street right now that it's not. I will follow up on that. I have disagreed with the board on a few key issues. One, I think the trespassing sign is unnecessary. I'll continue to share that. I might get outvoted. And number 2, I do think that public comment and public participation, real-time public comment, should be part of every Board of Police Commissioners meeting. I disagree strongly, and said in the last Board of Police Commissioners meeting how much I disagreed with the fact that we did not have real-time public participation. Here's my thing. I don't mind people yelling at me. In fact, as you can see in the comments, a lot of people seem to dislike me strongly. That's okay. That's all right. It's my job to hear it. And it's the Board of Police Commissioners' job to hear it. And what you really can't say, and I understand why a lot of people are upset, how are you going to say that not only do you not have local control, but you're not even going to listen to local comment? And you're just going to say, hey, yeah, we got a bunch of emails, read about it later. That's not right. It's just not how I roll. And that needs to change. Lamar asks, are you in touch with other mayors across the nation? Absolutely. Every day. I'm talking to other mayors. I have a group of mayors that I speak to, both relating to COVID-19 issues. We've spoken about public safety, policing, other issues. There are a lot of mayors I respect who have done some hard work in tough times, including, I guess to get under the skin of some of you who are kind of conservative, the mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, for whom I have great respect. A number of other mayors, African-American mayors in the South, typically, that I've had a chance to build a relationship with, the mayors of all races and backgrounds all throughout our country, and I'll keep doing that for Kansas City. Frank Martin, I answered your question about casinos. My favorite thing about y'all who don't like the casino orders, by the way, the answer is it's state controlled, so please call the Missouri Gaming Commission. But my view is that y'all don't like the requirements anyway. I've never gotten that. You know, you're kind of like making this sort of thing. I mean, here's the thing. We're doing what we can do to be safe. I don't run the state of Missouri. I didn't run for governor. I'm not in the state legislature. I'll never be in the state legislature. I'm doing what I can here. And we're going to make sure we do what we can here that we can do to keep people safe. All right. All right. Otherwise, there are a bunch of debates that I think will go on in the comments. Uh, I appreciate actually, don't, oh gosh. You in Agenda 21, and this guy is just another minion to help usher that agenda in. I have no idea what UN Agenda 21 is. Uh, I want to give a shout out to Children's Mercy Kansas City for saving my daughter's life. Shout out to Children's Mercy. I'll make sure we add that in. Somebody says you have a very good looking head, sir, very aerodynamic. Yeah, man, you know, you take what you can get in the world. Um, and I think that I will probably say that's pretty good for now, okay? Um, we have a lot more work to do. I know there's a lot more work. I'm going to try to do these a little bit more regularly so we can have further interactions. I think it's been a mistake that we haven't done as much. You know, I'll answer Kiara's question. She asked, why did you kneel on the street with me 6 months ago and ask me what you could do to help, only to do absolutely nothing about the officers that assaulted me? A few different things, Kiara, and I remember our conversation, and I remember meeting with you actually in my office at one point, and then we set up another meeting at 18th and Vine. You weren't able to attend. I'm happy to meet with you again. Usually, if you have a complaint against a law enforcement officer, the way that we usually do it, and I do not know the officers that were involved in the interaction with you, that is really where the Office of Community Complaints comes in. I would encourage you to file a complaint, not just with them, but the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office, if this incident occurred in Jackson County, have set up a line where if you have concerns or complaints, particularly in connection with policing, you can either go to the OCC, connect to the Board of Police Commissioners, if you're not comfortable with that, through the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. Those are several of the ways to do it. Unfortunately, in my position, I largely don't fire anybody. I don't investigate. I do shed light on things, and so the more I can learn, the more I'm interested in knowing. But I think in terms of seeking justice, those would be the two steps that I would encourage you to take a part in. What are your thoughts on UBI programs, the Universal Basic Income? I'm a significant supporter on it. I think we need to fundamentally retool how our budgets are done. I've seen a group of mayors, including the mayor of Stockton, California, the mayor of Atlanta, have called for the federal government to provide more funding directly to the cities that would help support that. Of course, I support that. And I'd like to pretty much do more in how we roll that out. I know Andrew Yang, who was a presidential candidate who worked a lot with that before. I look forward to us learning more about it as well. Let me see here. And by the way, Kiara, I do agree with what Cheryl Ferguson said. She's very effective in terms of, I think, finding ways there. OCC prosecutor, Ms. Ferguson knows a bunch of stuff too. And here's my thing that you probably don't understand. And first of all, I enjoy visiting with everybody. Is that even if you disagree with me, I think mayors are here to serve. So I don't want any of y'all, even if you've asked me about Agenda 21 from the UN or 9/11, you know, I'm here to serve. I'm here to answer questions. You're not going to like all my answers. There's going to be some things I can't answer sometimes, but that's where we are. Cassie, I answered your question right at the beginning of the show. So just scroll back up and we'll have that for you on our business restrictions, among other things. In the meantime, with that, I'm going to say to everybody, stay safe. I appreciate you. We're going to continue to do all we can to keep each other safe. Happy holidays. Most of these questions have been answered before. I love you. I love y'all, as Buckwheat used to say on SNL. God bless you. Oh, banks on the east side. I like that. One thing that I am pushing for banking on the east side and better lending is that the banks that we lend with every year need to do more lending as part of their agreement in getting the city's investment. Every year we're banking about $1 billion, $1.7 billion really, with banks. As part of that, we need their agreement to make sure that they're doing some lending in Kansas City, Missouri, particularly in historically underinvested underrepresented communities, places like where the neighborhood I live in, where you can't get a loan the same way, right? That's the sort of thing that we need to do. That's what I care about. All right, I've done too much. My staff's gonna get mad at me once they see all this. I love you. Happy holidays.